The broad-based Black Economic Empowerment Codes are based on the objectives of Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act. They are aimed at transforming South Africa's economy to allow meaningful participation by Black people. Therefore, it will substantially change the racial profile of company owners, managers and skilled professionals, increase the ownership and management of companies by Black women, communities, workers, cooperatives and others, and help them access more economic opportunities. To discuss further, I'm joined by the chairperson of the JCCI, Mukaddam. Welcome to Leading Opinion.
Thank you, Nashina.
Is BEE the answer to transforming South Africa's economy as believed by governments?
I think that it's certainly one of the pillars that is going to contribute to the economic transformation of our country. And I think that the manner in which it will hopefully be undertaken and embraced by business will be the key as to whether it's going to be successful as government intended.
Are we seeing changes take place in the economy since it was first implemented?
Well, since it was first implemented, and if you look back over a decade ago, there have been definitely significant shifts in the landscape. So you've seen a lot more Black business people getting involved in the economy at different strata, and that's been very gratifying. Having said that, the numbers that we had hoped to see, or the significant shift that we'd hoped to see, like we'd seen on the political front, on the economic front, we haven't seen much of that. So there has still been pockets where you've seen change, and that hasn't been significantly felt by the masses. As to whether the new codes and the amended codes will bring that through, there's some concerns and some anxieties about it.
Yeah, and definitely you just mentioned that there are a lot of concerns, a lot of objections coming through, as we know, from small business in particular. They're seeing this as just another layer of red tape.
Sure. I think that the whole BEE discussion...
the question is, how can we make it work practically from their point of view?
So the BEE discussion right now and where it's at needs to be contextualized, and that is in the context of the ease of doing business. What's happened now, and specifically our members are feeling, is that it has become very difficult to remain in business, considering all the overregulation, the e-tolling, the additional taxes, the lack of electricity supply, consistent electricity supply, etc. If you juxtapose the BEE requirements on top of that, then you'll find that our smaller businesses are definitely taking strain. When you look at the new indicators and the way that they have been clustered, the smaller businesses are not jumping up and down with excitement because they're not quite sure what it means. In addition to that, there is some grey areas that requires further clarification and further information from the DTI on, and we haven't seen those coming through quickly enough. So what's happened now with the smaller businesses is they're saying, okay, they're going to adopt a wait and see approach, and if they're a qualifying small enterprise and they fall beneath the threshold, then it doesn't really matter much. So we're almost seeing, which I don't think government intended, is that businesses, smaller businesses are saying, well, we'll be compliant if we're forced to, but if we don't, let's just wait and see what's going to happen.
But there has to be that commitment coming through to make it work from small business side, so that we can see this transformation taking place.
Correct.
What has been the response from the DTI with regards to these concerns, these objections, and around clarity?
Sure. The DTI has not been as vocal in providing the guidance and the clarity that is needed by business, and certainly what we've heard from the practitioners, the verification practitioners, they're all confused. So if I speak to practitioner A today and practitioner B tomorrow, I might get two different interpretations, and that's worrisome for business. If we look at, obviously the listed entities are going to be having a lot more pressure applied to them because they're going to have to recalculate their scores against the amended codes, and that's going to be a challenge. But where we're particularly concerned is that middle tier business, and that's where we see the change in South Africa coming from. In the next decade already, South Africa is seeing that the SMEs and the smaller businesses are the greatest contributor to GDP. The NDP has looked at it being in the next 10 to 15 years being 90% contribution to the economy, to the economic growth of our country. So that means, how does then that small or medium tier business look at transforming? Because that's where you're going to feel the economic transformation. That's where you're going to see whether or not there are any shifts in the country. Because right now we haven't seen the successes of the political transformation we've not felt in the economic space at all.
And certainly South Africa's small business sector does not compare favorably to other small business sectors in other emerging economies. But government believes that this will push push the sector to a higher growth trajectory, but then it comes down to clarity around these administrative issues as well. There are some people who believe that it should be scrapped and government should look at different policies to implement transformation, but then I suppose it would come back to the issue of compliance.
Correct. And I have heard that in the market. I'm not completely convinced. I think that it is an ideal and a utopian view that we would like to depend on the goodwill of mankind. I don't think that that's always going to be the case. So I do think that you need some kind of imperative with a measure of penalty attached to guarantee change. Having said that, I don't think one must be overly punitive because business has to keep running. And the cost of doing business, now if you're looking at BEE considerations, you're looking at governance considerations, you're looking at all the different tax categories, people are questioning why should they bother even being in business because it's become so hard. So I think what government and specifically the DTI need to do is contextualize the discussion. They further need to add some sanity onto the whole process and give very specific guidelines in terms of what their expectations are with the new scoring. So I think that a lot of the concerns are coming around the ownership indicator and the fact that there's a lot more focus. I support it though because we do need additional ownership if we are going to see black ownership, if we're going to see the transformation in the economy. However, I think the skills development and the entrepreneurial contribution to entrepreneurial development, that is where the sustainable success is going to come from. And that's what certainly what the chamber and what our smaller businesses are most excited about.
And it's not possible just to go on this goal of churning out entrepreneurs. There are a lot of things that has to be considered. The question is, do we have a competitive economy to support the codes? Because realistically speaking, businesses have to look at their strategies and have to adjust every time there's a revised code that has to be implemented.
Yes. And I think you've hit it on the head. I think that right now everybody in the market is in a frenzy, so everybody's talking about BEE, and we've almost forgotten that BEE is just one factor for business to consider. So the different projects and the incubators that the JCCI is rolling out this year and next year, you'll see that like with the SIPC stats that we've been seeing for a long time now, within the first 3 years of business, once you've registered, if you are still not around and having grown somewhat, then you're dead in the water. So now you've tacked on BEE to that. But so if I'm a black professional and I decide that I'm a black teacher and I decide I'm going to take a severance package and I'm going to open up a business, that doesn't guarantee that I will still be in business at 3 years hence, nor will I be a sustainable business contributing to the growth of our economy in 5 or 10 years.
Nor could you be a reliable supplier in the supply chain of operations.
Quite. So I think that the transformation agenda needs to understand that our business, the way that we have approached doing business, the way that we look at the growth of our economy and what are some of the targets that have been set. We look at the pressures that we're facing continentally, not just nationally and globally. We are no longer the golden child on the continent at all when it comes to the economics of it. And quite frankly, what we're seeing cross-border, also the Chamber looking at its foreign members, is in other countries nobody has to worry about BEE. And if you're looking at their economies being strengthened and being energized, where you've got a lot of incentives being offered by government, where importing is encouraged, embraced and supported, you've got exporters themselves being assisted in growing. Our businesses are taking strain on a lot of levels. So BEE is somehow being the initiative and the motivation, which is sound and solid and real and truly the right thing to do, is somehow being lost in the fact that it has become an administrative nightmare, the fact that we're getting insufficient clarity or not getting any word from DTI in the way that we need it, that is consistent, so that the verification agencies can actually assist business in making sense of all of this.
So to sum it up, the vision is there. It's the right vision to have when it comes to transforming the economy on paper, but practically speaking, it's just not working out. Let me ask you this question. Having said all of that, if you were to suggest any changes to the codes, what would they be?
That's quite a loaded question, Oshina. I think that I wouldn't so much look at the change of the codes right now, because we've had so many different options coming through over the years. What I would change is the focus on how the codes are to be implemented, for there to be greater clarity coming from the statutory body, from the government, as to what the envisaged end game is. I would also like to see a closer working relationship between government and the verification agencies, because you must know business is stuck in the center. So we think we interpret things in a certain way, and then you, like I said, you speak to one verification agency and then they tell you something else, and then in a casual conversation when we're talking to DTI, which is one of our strategic partners, then you hear something else. So I think what's causing a lot of anxiety and confusion is that there are so many voices, everyone's clamoring to be heard, and business doesn't know which way to turn. So that's actually what I would change. I'd spend a lot more energy on making sense of what we have right now with the amendments, what we have and what that actually means for me as a business person, for the chamber, for all our members, in terms of contributing to the sustainability of our business, so that we know we can contribute to a greater South Africa and a transformed and economically transformed South Africa.
So let's hope the DTI comes to the party soon and also just puts business at ease and listens to their concerns and takes it seriously to some degree as well, and works together with the private sector to ensure the successful implementation of these codes. Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure. Thank you, Noshina.